these are the texts. Nobody else says anything else. Among the Muslims, this is the key text. Nobody has anything else. That's why Ibn al-Jazari, at the beginning of his book, spends something like 50 pages discussing this particular hadith and the meanings behind this particular hadith, because that is it. That is the evidence that we have. So recite of it what is easy for you. What does that mean? If I heard in South Africa use the expression, park that. Meaning just like leave that thought on the side for a while. So, and I thought, well, what's going on? This one's trying to present it sort of vaguely historically. That came to my mind. So I thought, right, okay, what evidence have we got from the time of the Prophet ﷺ? And I thought, well, that hadith is the obvious one. That is obviously dated at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and gives us some indication of what was going on at his time. But that's it. We don't know if it was like that the week before, the week after, the year before, the year after. When was the year even? We don't know that. So there's a huge amount we don't know. But all we can say is that was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Now Ibn Mujahid, he's who I started with. Ibn Mujahid is already 300 years later. Automatically, he's way after, you know. And all of those readers that we've been looking at, like Nafi and Asim, etc., they're all sort of died 110, died 120, died 150, died. That's 2nd century. So that again is years after the prophetic event. So there's, it's, if you like, there's the initial phenomenon of the revelation, some memories that we've got in hadith, and then basically what you might call a big gap. That's how the critics would look at it, probably. A big gap, because it then almost like jumps a generation. So the generation of the companions, they've now passed away, and it's the people after them, the successors, and the successors of the successors that are carrying this on as best they can. And so it's like fiqh as well. It's like all these disputes about hadith and so on. So it's like trying to fill in that gap. That first 100 years is basically undocumented, except for a few exceptions, important exceptions, incidentally. Like, for example, if you have coins which say "Qul huwallahu ahad," then at least one ayah out of 500 and 5,000 and whatever it is ayahs, you can say, yes, I've got documentary evidence. I've got a dated coin which says "Qul huwallahu ahad," or something like that. But how about the rest of the Qur'an? That's what people say, you see. And you've got Malik quoting from the Qur'an, but he's only quoting little bits. So then people criticize me, for example, and they say, oh yeah, but that's only, how can you say that's all the Qur'an? I can't say it's all the Qur'an, I'm not saying that. So I'm saying that the evidence is very limited, and we've got a bit here, and then a big gap, and then a bit here, and then a bit of a gap, and then by the time you get to Ibn Mujahid, you've got solid evidence, and you've got فَتَبَيَّنُوا فَتَثَبَّتُوا written down in a manuscript with other copies of that manuscript and references to that book, and you get all this sort of cross-reference. But Ibn Mujahid wrote a book on the Shawadh, which we don't have. We have reference to it, but we don't actually have the book. So what was that? His student, Ibn Khalaway, did write a book on the Shawadh, and that's actually quite useful. But it's, do you see what I'm getting at? It's like, even in the more recent times, it's almost like a guesswork that one's got anything. So it's very, very difficult, but it gets very complicated. So one does the best one can.